Hello and welcome to another episode of Battle Ready.
Ready.
And today we thought we'd talk a little bit about Spearhead. But yeah, there's the spear in my head.
Yeah.
But not just the game. I think lots of people covered the game mode and high level. I think Spearhead's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Super duper good. Very tactical. Very interesting. Solid game mode.
Mhm.
Now, obviously, we haven't played every Spearhead against every Spearhead.
We don't have all the spears.
We don't even have all the Spearheads. But overall, it seems to be pretty well balanced. It's not like one side's always just conglomerating everybody else, right? So good. But the thing that makes it interesting is up until now, okay, so let's say Spearhead is sort of like the shorter, more compact.
The way Combat Patrol was meant to be.
Yeah, for sure. But it's the shorter, more compact, easier to get into game in the Mortal Realms, right? But there used to be a game. Well, there still is a game, another game that's shorter,
but it's been
more
forgotten
compact,
in the shadows of Gur.
easier to play, easier to get into in the Mortal Realms, and that was Warcry. So I guess the question I have is, does Spearhead kill Warcry?
Yes.
Sorry, Drake's got strong opinions. All right, why do you say? Well, first, what's Warcry?
Warcry is a thing where you have 6 to 10 dudes, and I have 6 to 10 dudes. They're all individual dudes, and we run around punching stuff.
Yeah, so Warcry is sort of a skirmish level game where instead of moving guys in units, you don't have your band of 5 guys moving together. You have individual operators. Right? Everyone's doing their own thing, and you have teams. And now, with that in mind, why do you think Spearhead kills Warcry?
I think Spearhead for sure kills Warcry because the cards are better systemed.
In Spearhead, you mean?
In Spearhead, yeah. It's a better way of scoring. There's easier ways to score points. Warcry is mainly a kill game.
Well, I think that in Spearhead, the scoring is more consistent, right? Because it's always you're looking after objectives. Those objectives only move around a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you have the cards, which it's 12 cards, but you only get 3 a turn. So which 3 of those 12 you get on a given turn will mix things up a little bit, for sure. But you know what 12 things are going to be in there, right? Whereas in Warcry, at the very beginning of the game, you draw a couple of cards to sort of set up the battle, and one of them is how you're going to be scoring. Sometimes it's objectives. Sometimes it's kill special people. Sometimes it's the enemy has one super secret person, and you've got to find and kill that guy. Sometimes it's grab treasure and run. So it's like sort of objectives, but they move around a little bit. Yeah, so it's very different. Spearhead is definitely way more consistent. You feel like you're playing a very similar game every time.
Yeah.
Not in like too samey, but in like, if I'm sitting down to play Uno, I expect to play reverse cards. But it'd be weird to sit down to play Uno and suddenly it's like, now let's get out the board, right? And Warcry can sort of be like that, right? Where you're sitting down to play Warcry and you're like, oh, we got a treasure one. Okay, let's play through the treasure one.
Yeah, and that's one thing. If you're playing certain armies and you get a bad objective one, the game's basically already over.
That is sort of true in Warcry because some of the guys are like, these guys are super good at getting treasure. Oh, but it was an objective one.
Last.
Ah, dang it. These guys are super good at holding objectives. Ah, but it was a killing one.
Yeah.
Ah, shoot. So sometimes you get guys that are good at one of the ways of winning, but the card you happen to draw is not that way of winning. You're playing a different game than you prepared for. So that can happen in Warcry for sure.
I also feel that Warcry is super random.
How so?
All your special powers are random on whether you'll get them or not.
Yeah, that's true. So instead of activating powers like every hero phase or whatever, you roll dice, and then if you get doubles, triples, or 4 of a kind, quads, then you can activate your special powers. So you can only activate them
if you roll.
That said, I don't think that's that big a deal because you do get wild dice, right? Quads are still rare, but you can wild yourself up to a triple most times. You can do although even then, a lot of them are like, I finally got my triple. What's your triple? Use the value of the dice you're like, oh, I rolled triple ones. This ability is going to suck, right? Whereas if you roll triple sixes, it's triple fives. You're like, oh yeah, okay, this ability is pretty awesome. Yeah, there is that.
I also think that it's too random in that everything, all the deployments are different.
I actually think that's something in Warcry's favor. However, one thing I will say is that the terrain in Warcry is worse. The terrain itself is cool looking.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's cooler looking than the Spearhead terrain. Spearhead terrain's cool, but the meat trees, I think, are cool, at least the first set of meat trees. They kept putting meat trees in every box. And by the end of it, I was so sick of those stupid gnarlwoods. But
kind of forced.
One thing that's bad about Warcry is you basically need terrain with multiple levels, right? You need to have something that gets you up off the ground and you can fight up in the trees or whatever. And if you don't have that, the game is going to suffer for it, right? Whether you have the meat trees or in old Warcry, you had the
pipes.
What were those things? The Varanite
Towers.
molten tower things. Yeah. So, but you had to have something that got you off the floor and you could run around up top. And you don't need that in Spearhead. And I think that's a good thing because in Spearhead, the terrain you get, you can just play that right over to AOS, right? You can basically get any terrain for any game, as long as it's, you don't want to have cyberpunk, spaceships, 40K stuff. Unless you want to. That's cool too, I guess.
We did once on the old Caradron campaign. We did use a piece of 40K to represent the Gridge settler.
So, you can when the moment's right. But with Warcry, you can't do that. With Warcry, you have to have
specific terrain.
That it doesn't have to be bespoke. Like you don't need the one that Games Workshop sells, but you can't get any old terrain, right? Yeah. You have to get terrain with multiple levels, and so that's I think a little bit negative. I do like though that the setup is way different every time. I like that a lot because it made for interesting challenges in the way that you would flank people and stuff like that. I do think that's good. Spearhead lets you set up the terrain the way that players want. So it is a little bit not every game's going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be similar-ish because there's only two layouts for where the objectives are. So there's sort of like places you want to put the terrain, right? I think it's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that in Spearhead. I just think that if you were comparing them, Warcry has the better setup system because there's just more terrain.
One thing I think, at least personally, I don't like about Warcry is I don't have enough toys to play with.
Well, that's good and bad too, right? Because on the bad side, yeah, if you want the experience of like an army, like a group of guys regimented out there ready to fight, you're not going to get that in Warcry, right? But some people want I want to play the game where it's just this band of 5 dudes. And they're just out there fighting, right? They're not regimented up in war. They're just 8 guys that sort of all like Nurgle, and so they all just want to fight. And so if you wanted that, I think Warcry does that better. And I think that's the thing for me is when we say does Spearhead kill Warcry, I think it does for us.
Yeah.
And that's saying I like Warcry. I like Warcry. I think I like it more than Drake.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I really like Warcry. But now that there's Spearhead, I like moving units around more.
The head is Warcry.
What?
When I stuck the spear in your head, your head was Warcry.
I like moving units around more. I think that's funner than moving one guy. I like the idea of a general with their troops more than just we're some wackos in the forest, right? I like that idea. And if I'm looking for a game that's short and a game that's simpler, I think Warcry probably still is simpler than Spearhead, but not by a lot.
And I think Warcry is a little longer than Spearhead.
It's probably a little shorter, but not by a lot. But I guess what I'm trying to say is when I want a game that's contained in this space, both Spearhead and Warcry are there, and I like Spearhead a little bit more. So it's pretty hard to say, let's play Warcry right now. It's pretty hard. Now, let's say that you were trying to decide between yourselves. Let's think of some positive points for Warcry. All right. One, I think it is a little simpler and it is a little shorter.
I will count. I'll be the score counter.
Well, I don't think it's. I think Spearhead's better, so I don't think it's. We're gonna like the numbers are gonna add up. But so there is that, right? It's not, but it's not that much bigger or more simple. So that's like a half point.
Okay.
It's once you've got all the stuff, it's cheaper. It is cheaper to get a new Warcry warband than it is to get a new Spearhead.
So it's 1 point. We're at 1.5 now.
Warcry warbands are like $60, something like that, and then you only get you only have to paint up 8 to 10 small models, right? Spearhead, it's more like it's a little over $100, and it could be a lot more models, right? So a lot bigger painting project.
Unless you get the giants.
Part of the store. Get the just 3 little megas.
Yeah.
Not megas, baby giants.
Yeah.
3 baby giants.
Man crushers.
So there is that. I think Warcry has that. Now, the setup, like to get your initial stuff and your terrain and your cards and your dice and all that, Warcry might actually, it might be a little more expensive. But once you're set up, adding more variety is easier with Warcry.
I've got 2 more things in favor of.
Let's hear them. No, we're on Warcry. Warcry now.
Never mind then.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, if people are trying to decide between themselves what I like Spearhead better or Warcry better, these are some reasons to pick Warcry. I think also if you're the kind of person that likes skirmish better, you like the idea of 8 independent operators all going off and doing their own thing, or these guys coming in to help this guy who's got the treasure and run away. That's Warcry, right? That's not Spearhead. Spearhead, you have multiple models, but because you're moving units, each side really has like 4 or 5 pieces, right? When you think about it that way.
You can play them with bricks.
Yeah, you can play with both games. You can play with anything, just empty bases with nothing on them, right?
Just imagine how tall they are.
I think Warcry does also have that verticality. So even though I think it's negative for getting the stuff you need to play the game, it does have some cool stuff where you're kicking people off bridges and things like that. It lends itself to a little bit more of a cinematic experience. That said, how often do you actually kick people off of bridges and stuff?
I don't know if I've ever kicked someone.
We've done it a couple times. It's certainly happened. We've kicked people into pipes and things like that. It happens, but not every game for sure.
Oh, yeah, no.
And so even though that is there, it's hard to count it as a big plus because it would be one thing if you did something cool like that every game. You're like, oh, that was amazing. But you kind of don't.
Yeah.
You kind of don't. It can happen, but that doesn't always happen.
I've got 2 more things for Spearhead.
No, we're on the Warcry stuff.
When are we going to be on Spearhead stuff?
Well, when we finish the goods of Warcry.
I think we have.
All right, if you want to get to it so bad, what is good on Spearhead?
Spearhead is good for newer players because there's nothing to decide on. You get a Spearhead box.
I think that's true for Warcry if you're buying the warbands. Warcry has an ability where you can make your guys, like you can take some of your existing Caradrons and make a band, or you take some of your existing Stormcast and make a band.
Well, what I mean is like if you buy a warband, there are options on how you build them. That's what I mean.
I guess that's true. So I think that was more true with earlier warbands than for the more recent ones. But you're right. There are options on how to build them. And with the Spearhead boxes, although there are options, for example, if you buy the Seraphon one, you don't have to build it as a Old Blood on Carnosaur. You could build it as the Skink on Troglodyte because all the parts are in there. But the Spearhead box, if you're going to play Spearhead, you build it as the Old Blood on Carnosaur. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know that that's such a huge issue with the more recent kits. I'm trying to think of the more recent ones. I don't think it's as big a deal. All right, what was your second one?
Twists happen every turn in Skaven Tide. And twists happen once before the battle starts, and barely ever matter.
I think they can matter a lot actually in Warcry, and I think that's why they're worse. Because I think in Warcry, sometimes a twist. Well, actually, no, that's not true. Sometimes we've had twists that were
Useless.
barely mattered. That's totally true. But I like that in Spearhead, you do get a twist, but the twist is like a little thing to play around. It's not super impactful. It matters, but it's not overbearing. And it often gives a bonus to whoever's behind, the underdog, which is great.
In Spearhead or?
In Spearhead, yeah. Because there's no underdog in Warcry. Whereas in Warcry,
one thing that happens.
It's sort of all over the map. Because sometimes we've definitely had some, now that you mention it, that just didn't matter. It didn't count. Who cares? It was like we were playing without a twist. And we've had some that were so impactful
that one said
it was like we were just playing a different game. We were hardly even playing Warcry anymore. We were playing the twist. And then some that get it right. There are for sure some that get it right. But it is a little bit more all over the map. Whereas the twists in Spearhead, at least the ones that I have right now for the Action Garen sideboards, feel about right. They feel about right. They are impactful and they make you do things or play a little bit differently, jump off of objectives or whatever, without feeling like, oh, this is a whole new game now. It's over. I've totally lost all my choice because now I have to do this. So that's good. Yeah, I think if you're looking in that space, if you're looking for a simpler AOS game, Mortal Realms, that's going to play in an hour,
ish.
It's really hard to recommend Warcry over Spearhead. I think we would both choose Spearhead
for sure,
pretty much every time now, which is sad because I liked Warcry. It
was fine.
Drake liked it, but definitely not as much as me. I like Warcry a lot, and we have a bunch of war bands. We've got 4 or 5 war bands for not even more than that.
Each faction.
No, not for each faction, but we have.
We've got over one of the little boxes.
We have. Quite a few. We've got quite a few warbands. And some of them can be used in AOS, so that's good. But yeah, I just feel like not super interested in playing Warcry anymore because Spearhead fills that same space. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing for AOS? I don't know. I think that on the one hand it's good because you're going to get people who enjoy it, and then they're like, maybe I will expand this Spearhead or into a 2,000-point army. Or they might even say, I'm not interested in a 2,000-point army, but I could paint up another Spearhead, and then they'll get more factions and have a lot more variety. That's super cool. But I do think it leaves behind people who really, really like the skirmish game, right? If you're the kind of person that really likes skirmish, you're like, I don't want to move units. I don't care about blocks of infantry. I just want my cool dudes to all be running around doing their own little cool things. It's going to leave those people behind. So I think, but unless you're one of those people, unless you are like, I want skirmish, I don't want units, that's Warcry. But otherwise, I feel like just about everybody is going to be better served by Spearhead.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Got them all.
You got nothing?
I already said them all.
I just figured you'd have like 3 more reasons why Spearhead was good if I came back to you. All right, well, tell us below in the comments below, have you played Spearhead, and does it replace Warcry for you? Clearly, they're different games, but when you've got that much time to play a game of about that much complexity, do you find yourself gravitating towards one more than the other? Or are you like, I could go either way. I like them both. Thank you. I like them both so much. Let us know in the comments below. This has been another episode of Battle Ready. Thanks so much for watching.